Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our next episode of Making Hazing History with Mike and Hank. So I am your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University, and our co-host, of course, every Sunday night is Hank Nuwer. Hank is the author of Hazing, Destroying Young Lives, Wrongs of Passage, High School Hazing, and The Hazing Reader. He's also retiring longtime Alpha Lambda Delta chapter advisor at Franklin College. Welcome back to the show, Hank.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
It's always great having you. Every Sunday night, I look forward to this, learning something new about hazing in a different area. And of course, today we're going to be talking about hazing in athletics. So let's start to drill down a little bit on this, Hank. Hank, tell us, who was the first well-known athlete to die in hazing, and when and where was that?
Okay. Interesting enough, it was in 1927 at a time when there was great hazing awareness to stop freshman, sophomore hazing, which we talked about in another episode. And a lot of athletes were getting involved, including Branch McCracken, who was a star basketball player at Indiana University, a member of a fraternity, and also a member of Sphinx, another well-known organization. And so a lot of athletes were against physical hazing in fraternities at this time. So it's ironic that what happened in 1927 at the University of Texas is that a football player joining Delta Kappa Epsilon was the last to be initiated, and that initiation, which was not the formal one, of course, but a hazing one, was to go and lie on bed springs which were connected to the city power. I don't know if there was a surge because the others had gone through this too, if somehow there was a way to step up the power, if he was just more susceptible, but he went into immediate shock. All of the cheering and yelling that would go along with such event suddenly stopped. They tried to take him very quickly to get help, but it was too late. He was dead within 20 minutes. His father, not only the fact that he was a well-known athlete, but Nolte's father was very, very wealthy, a wealthy businessman, known all over Texas. And so this case got great national attention. As much as the Piazza case in our own time, the Nolte McElroy case gained ill repute in the press.
Now, I read about that case. I remember, I think he was wearing like wet pajamas or something like that at the time.
Or sweaty. I mean, that's part of it as well. The whole idea is it was risky, should not have been done, but it had been done in Masonic organizations going back as well, for many years. So it was sort of a bizarre initiation, but it was not unheard of at that particular time. And hopefully it created awareness that any others who were doing it stopped. But it was a definite tragedy. And there is a memorial page on the University of Texas Longhorns now. I think it's titled Gone Too Soon, which eulogizes Nolte.
Does athletic hazing differ from, say, fraternity hazing or class hazing, which is what we talked about last week? Does that differ in any way, and how so?
Okay, the hazing that you would have in athletics typically occurs after some sort of honorable function, like a team banquet, and it would be a party carried on afterwards. For example, there isn't such a thing as pledging, and there isn't any sort of prolonged paddling or anything. It's usually one long night of drinking and carrying on, as opposed to an entire semester. But prior to it, there is the needling, just like a pledge is being called a pledge. Well, the newcomer on a team is, of course, being called rookie, and asked to do some minor things like carrying the equipment. But when it gets to this event, it's a party, And one of the big problems is that the players are as inebriated as the rookies. So all bets are off in terms of supervision. And people are not looking out for each other. There's no such thing as a big brother, for example, looking after his little brother, which makes it different from fraternity. And the best example I can give you was about the year 2001, when Ken Christensen, who was an athlete at the University of Minnesota Duluth, was involved in a team sport in which male and female players were there. This was the hockey team, and a lot of drinking. No one kept an eye on him. And as often happens when someone is too inebriated, he went out to try to get air in a chilly winter's night in Minnesota and perished of hypothermia. His body was found the next morning. A lot of grief, a lot of denial on the part of the university. The parents sued, of course, and won a settlement on that one. But it had all the characteristics of athletic hazing. One night of riotous behavior, alcohol. His face, which really troubled his parents, was full of magic marker markings. So he was all, for his initiation, he was all written up. So some of that can compare with hazing cases and fraternities, but I think you can see a clear difference in terms of the nuances here.
Were there any incidents in which male and female athletes played a part?
Yes, there was. A good example would be the soccer team at the University of North Carolina. And this was a case involving Greg Danielson, who did a chapter or co-wrote a chapter with me for the Hazing Reader some years ago. At that party, the males had to wear tiny jock straps. They had little tiny hats on. They had to go dead drunk into a store and buy a candy bar. But there were female athletes present at this one as well. And so I have maybe 50 pictures from that party. The women are just as prominent as the males are. So there were girlfriends, yes, but there were also female athletes present at that party.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I understand that a judge made you work in one particular case with the hazers instead of sending them to jail. Is that true?
Yes, the judge decided that there wasn't sufficient reason to send 12 young men in the death of Nicholas Haben at Western Illinois University in a lacrosse club death. And at the request of the mother, he wanted to give them a punishment. I'm not sure I like it that I'm regarded as a punishment, but I agreed to do this. It was startling to me. I read about it in the newspaper before I was informed. No reporter called me or anything. I read it in the newspaper that a judge had, at their mother's request, had wanted a hazing writer, myself, to come in. I did get in touch with the mother. I got more details. This was 1990. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that this is something, as a person who writes about hazing, that's something I should do. And with the agreement of about 9 of the 12, 3 did not cooperate, including the ringleader, which I really want to stress, including the ringleader. The others did cooperate. And I went to Macomb, Illinois, and except for the alcohol, which was stationed, I think about 12 stations with a bottle at each one, I went into the river, I went into the rough terrain, I went where they would have been reading their letters of allegiance to the club. My clothes were torn, dirty, etc. I can't imagine what it would have been like with the alcohol. For sure, I would have died on something like that. But it gave me a sense of how things happen from the beginning to the end. For one, several of the players were in fraternities, so they took the rookies and Nick to their houses to do some of these things, such as to have rookie stew, which was a combination of schnapps and terrible substances, not enough to get anyone drunk, but enough to make people vomit, on to mild paddling, to calisthenics, until they got to the actual rugby field and had the stations with bottles all around. And Nick, again, you can never predict things in a hazing incident, was a non-drinker who often had been the designated driver after a game. He had refused to drink. He told his roommate that he couldn't let his fellow rooks down, and he was going to drink that night, which surprised the players. And just like with the Minnesota Duluth situation, everyone was drunk. The rookies, the veterans, and the thing I remember the most, at least 6 out of the 9, we thought we should stop it. We thought we should step in. We didn't. And we're going to regret that for the rest of our lives. And the hope that somebody else would step in. But the ringleader was kind of a powerful person, again, would not talk to me, would not answer my letters, and he orchestrated this event. So Nick collapsed. The story gets more tragic. He's taken to the residence hall. A Western Illinois employee, instead of calling 911, puts a pillow under his head, leaves, and Nick dies. He suffocates on his own vomit. So there were several times, several intervals that Nick could have been saved.
Wow.
Then the last part of it, his mom, Alice Haben, and brother Charles, who later became a star athlete, he was in high school at the time, they lobbied to get the Illinois law strengthened and encompassing athletic hazing.
Wow. So many people could have stepped in, people on the team, school employees, and now they're going to live with this for the rest of their life in terms of, hey, maybe I could have done something to stop it. Wow. That's a powerful, powerful story.
Yeah, I can't tell the viewers, I can only try to communicate that I do a lot of interviews with athletes and celebrities and everything. I'm not nervous at all, but when you're talking to people who could have saved a life and their clothes are perspiring and they are agitated and they're young, good people, my shirt is totally soaked by the end of an interview. It's very, very stressful.
Yeah. Unbelievable. What about some other cases of athletic hazing that we should know about? Are there any other big ones that we should talk about?
Yeah, I've got a couple over here that I wanted to talk about. The most recent female death was with Alpha Kappa Alpha, but it was a star basketball player for a university in Illinois. And the Alpha Kappa Alpha one, the parents are blaming this former star athlete from Indianapolis, her suicide, on the physical hazing and mental hazing that she had to endure. So that's been most recent. And a couple of others, we need to talk about spirit clubs. Those are the people, for example, at the University of Texas who fire Smokey the Cannon and are kind of attendants to the football team, the basketball team, or the Roughnecks at Oklahoma, which are the people that take that Conestoga wagon with the ponies and take it around at halftime and are very involved after a touchdown, etc. You may remember, if you're a football fan, that there was an interference call on the Roughnecks and at the Orange Bowl one year that cost Oklahoma the game. Mm-hmm. And so they had that passed. But both have had some very bad incidents. The Roughnecks, 2006, 2007, had an incident, so the university said, you're not independent anymore. We're going to regulate your behavior. You can continue. And then the others, the Texas Cowboys, which has had 2 deaths, very, very similar, which were initiations held on an alum's property with a lot of physical exercises. First one was a drowning death of Gabe Higgins. And the second one of Nicky Cumberland was a sleep deprivation with the driver, where Nicky was killed in an auto accident. So those are two other recent ones that I think are important. And then I wanted to, we've talked about this on the Foodie Show. At the University of Reno, when I was a grad student, John Davies, a very big Division I football player, was killed in an initiation for the athletic club fraternity, if you want to call it that, called the Sundowners, in which he was beaten, made to drink an awful lot of alcohol, and died on a Native American Indian reservation at Pyramid Lake. And that was 1975, and that was the case that's propelled me to write about hazing all these years later, because I had seen several of their initiations.
Mm-hmm.
These were very public.
Gotcha. I'm going to do a screen share here so that way we can take a look at some of the men here who died in some of these athletic hazing incidences. Here's the newspaper clipping on Nolte McElroy, the 19-year-old football star from the University of Texas.
And I do want to point out that there's a typo there. His name is spelled Nolte.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, we have the correct spelling down over here.
Okay.
Down below. But yeah, I noticed that the spelling was different in the newspaper article. And then here.
This is the high school picture for Nick Haben. Nick was a baseball star, also good in football. He was a big guy,
Mm-hmm.
and natural in lacrosse. And his father had been his high school coach. His dad did not live that many years after Nick passed away. His father was absolutely devastated. And I was to the house to interview the family. Wonderful family, wonderful family.
Yeah.
But I look at it as a double tragedy, with his dad dying and with Nick passing.
Nick looks like he's an incredible athlete, I'll tell you that.
Oh, he was, and he was the best baseball catcher that his high school ever had. He could have played any one of 3 sports.
Wow. Wow. Then we have this picture here. This is Nicky Cumberland, right?
No, the first one is Nolte McElroy again. That's his yearbook picture.
That's his yearbook picture.
And the second one is Nicky Cumberland.
Gotcha.
And, his dad has become an activist and has just addressed the chancellor and Texas presidents just within the last year.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow, well, that was really helpful to kind of go through all of that and to understand some of the history of hazing that we've seen here in athletics. This has been really helpful for me, and I'm sure also for our audience as well. We have some other ideas that we want to bring to the show, but next week's topic is going to be band hazing and the death of Robert Champion at FAMU. So please tune into that. We certainly want to get into that. Some of the other ideas that we have coming later is looking at hazing in the military, looking at hazing in the major leagues. We've certainly seen that around. Looking at the Timothy Piazza case, because a lot of people maybe don't know all the details on that particular case. So if there is something else that you want to talk about here on the show regarding hazing in any area, please let us know. Either send an email to myself or to Hank, and then we'll make sure that we'll do the research and bring that to you on a show upcoming. So thank you so much for your time, Hank. We really appreciate that.
Thank you again. Great questions, and thanks.
Hey, it's my pleasure. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. If this was helpful, please share this with somebody else that you know that wants to know a little bit more about the history of hazing. And we'll see you on another episode sometime soon. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you next time.